Hey everybody, it's me, it's Jason Cush, owner designated broker of JP Cush & Associates. It's a little bit before noon local time, still in the 90s in October. Thank you, Arizona. Thought for my bi-weekly video blog this week, I would talk about something that's come up for me locally, out of town from clients, or not clients, but friends from out of town who have been asking the questions, and that is in regards to appraisals. So where to start? So the first place to start with appraisals is probably cash deals. Cash deals do not require an appraisal because appraisals are not for you, the buyer, really. They are for the bank. Because people think when they're getting money from the bank, because you go through so many things, the bank is really loaning you money. Yes and no. Really, the bank is loaning money against the asset. That's what they really care about. They want to be reasonably comfortable that you can pay for said asset, but if you can't, they want to make sure that they can get their money back out of said asset, so they kind of want to know what it's worth at that point in time, hoping that value remains the same or gets better over time, which on average it always has. We had the downturn where we had some losses there, which was definitely different for pretty much anybody I know. We've never lived through anything like that. But again, those appraisals are really all about the lender. They're not about you, which is why most sellers actually never see the appraisal either, because the buyer paid for that. Even if the seller gave concessions, the buyer still paid for that, and it's really none of the seller's business. So a couple things, let's talk about appraisal. So most contracts, when you are purchasing and you have a loan, are contingent upon appraisal. So if you're buying a house for $400,000 and it appraises at $350,000, you've got a couple options usually with that contract. Option number one is you can come up with the $50,000 difference in additional cash. So if you're doing a 90-10 loan, 10% down on a $400,000 loan, originally you were going to give $40,000. In that scenario, if it had appraised for $350,000, you'd give 35% on that loan to value, and then you'd give another $50,000 to make up the difference on the purchase price. So now instead of coming up with $40,000 on this transaction, you're coming up with $85,000 in the transaction. As you can imagine, that happens pretty much never. It's pretty rare, but it is an option. Option number two is the buyer and seller can negotiate, and that's usually what ends up happening, and it can happen in one of two ways. They can either have the seller come all the way down to the purchase price, which if you're using, for example, a VA loan, that's probably what's going to happen. VA loans stay tied to a house for at least a year off the top of my head. Ask a loan officer to be verified, but I think it ties to the house for at least a year. So if you try to sell it again for a year to another VA person, guess what? It's going to appraise at the same exact price. That's just how those things work. And if you are selling it to another person as a conventional or FHA, they may get their hands on that VA appraisal, and then you're going to have some trouble because that's going to be off too. So usually you end up lowering the price. Another option though is you can find something halfway in the middle or towards the bottom or something along those lines. So if I use that same example before, the $400,000 but it appraised for $350,000, let's say, hey, now we're going to sell it for $370,000 instead. That means the buyer needs to only come up with an additional $20,000. So now they're coming up with $55,000 instead of $40,000 in cash on that same 10% down loan, and the seller's losing, $30,000 in regards to the value that they thought they were going to get out of the house. So it's kind of everybody loses, everybody wins. That's usually a sign of a good negotiation, but that's usually what happens. Had a client, or again, not a client, but a friend from out of town who was having an issue on an appraisal on a new home purchase. Haven't gotten the result yet, but you can. The reason why is the appraisal did come in low, but the seller's asking for the appraisal to be re-reviewed. From my experience, both buyers and sellers have the right to ask for an appraisal to be re-reviewed. It rarely comes back changed, and if it comes back changed, it's a couple $1,000, like 1%, not $40,000 or 10% difference. So if you have an appraisal way off, it's probably not going to change. So that's kind of the things on appraisals. At the end of the day, too, what I remind all my clients and friends is, again, those appraisals are for the lender. They're not for you. We live in a society and in a free market economy where things are worth what somebody's willing to sell them for, and more importantly, what somebody's willing to buy them for. So if you're willing to pay $400,000 for that house, give it some serious thought on, how much more you want to come out of pocket, because yes, the appraisal came in low, but you were willing to pay $400,000 for it. So clearly it has that value for you. And it could, there are such things as bad appraisals. So they do happen. They are out there. They're difficult and they're tough to get through, but they do happen. So just understand that and figure maybe this was just a bad appraisal. I'll spin the dice or throw the dice and put in a little bit extra cash to get the home, and knowing that in a year I'll reappraise it and refinance it and yank that cash I had to put down back out. There's options. So think through it strategically and big picture. And as always, I'm here to help with all your real estate needs. Jason Cush, JP Cush Associates, 480-522-1073, serving all of Phoenix, Arizona. Thanks, everybody.